Across Newcastle and the Hunter, 2NURFM 103.7, and looks like there's a new glue in the neighbourhood. And joining us to talk about that, Professor from Science from the University of Newcastle, John O'Connor. John, always a pleasure. Before we get into the new glue and how that's all going to work, you want to have a bit of a look through how glue actually works to begin with, the hardening and tightening of everything together.
Well, the applications, that's right. And the glues are used quite broadly across our community, and they're used in things like sports, equipment, medicine, automotive and aerospace industries, cars. I mean, lots of parts of cars are glued together.
In fact, there was a lady in the news the other week that actually glued her hair. She tried to get it to stay together, stuck there.
Yeah. And in fact, some people will have experienced the case where they've got a wound, it's actually glued closed rather than stitched and so on. So, it quite a lot of different ways that glues can be used, but epoxy glues do need to be cured. In other words, they need to be encouraged to harden. And there are various ways of doing that. You can use light, you can use heat, sometimes air or moisture. And light's an interesting one. If you've been to the dentist and had a filling lately, they open your mouth and put a UV source in your mouth. Everything glows blue for a while, but that is the process of fixing the glue. Heating is another one, and in fact, in things like carbon fibre, the epoxy they use there, they've got to heat that up to high temperature for a long period of time. And of course, there are other situations like we were talking about, wounds and so forth. There are situations where you've got biological material or material which is just soft and can't take any heat. They may be opaque to light, so you can't use light. So there are lots of situations where the current methodologies don't work. And that's why a group at University in Singapore have come up with a different approach. And what they do is they take the epoxy glue and they mix into it nanoparticles. Nanoparticles, really small. A nanoparticle, technically, is 1,000th the size of a microscopic particle. And so that shows you how small they are.
If you drop one of those, you're not finding it again.
That's right. So these nanoparticles are made up of manganese, zinc and iron, and they respond to electromagnetic fields or changing magnetic fields. So what happens is, mixing with the glue, you excite these magnets or excite these nanoparticles with either a varying magnetic field or electromagnetic field, and you heat up the glue only. And that means you don't have to heat up the surrounding material. In the case of the carbon fibre...
It's very targeted, isn't it? Just the bit you want, not the outside stuff.
That's right. So this stuff sticks to the surface of something, it'll cure. And so in the case of the carbon fibre I was talking about a few minutes ago, it takes a tenth of the time, a tenth of the energy, 1/100th of the energy, a much lower power rating on the process. So for the carbon fibre things, you're using 1/100th of the energy, and it's curing so much quicker. So this is going to be a great opportunity to do something in spaces where confined space, even in a car, you go, okay, well, you can't send electromagnetic waves in there, but varying magnetic fields will penetrate metal, and so you can actually then use it on automotive, aerospace, and so they've now developed something which will certainly work quicker, protect the surfaces that you're trying to glue together, and save energy in the process.
So it's kind of a win-win all around, and like you said, the heat side of things is going to be good, and a lot of saving there as well. How far away could we before we might actually see some of this stuff really used widely, you reckon, John?
Well, it's been widely tested, in wood, ceramics, plastics, and so forth. But here's the crunch. They're now looking for commercial enterprises to allow them to take it from the lab to industry, to the big bad world. So this is often a very serious hiccup in any step. A lot of things can be developed in a lab. There's what's called a valley of death from what's happened in the lab through to startups and commercialisation and marketing and so forth before it comes out into a successful product.
I guess it's always a case of trying to target the right people that might be able to look at something and visualise themselves. And obviously you've got to have the right people, the right capital to be able to market that forward. So like you said, I would imagine there are quite a few skeletons in that valley of death, John.
Well, it's a challenge. Certainly the university encounters on a frequent basis. You get the engineers and the scientists here developing wonderful products, but to go from developing that wonderful product to actually seeing something in the market, and there's a couple of things that I'm watching very carefully with my colleagues, and they're trying to do just that. And it'd be interesting to see if they ever become a commonplace object. Commonplace meaning sort of lots of it out there being used, not necessarily in your home, but certainly in industry and so on, or something which just sort of fades into the below the surface, and you go, gee, that was unfortunate.
Yeah, and I imagine too, it's not always a case of people don't see the value and see that something has got potential. They look at it and go, okay, well, there's product A and product B. Both are really great. We can see how they'd pan out, but I can see a lot more money quicker in product A. So number B sits on the shelf and gathers dust.
Actually, there's a wonderful example with Teflon. It was discovered before the Second World War, and someone found it by accident, and they went, yeah, well, that's interesting. It's very expensive, not much use. And when the general in charge of the Manhattan Project came around looking for something that would protect the pipe work that was being used to separate the uranium, he heard about this stuff, fronted up, and the bloke said, well, this is it, but it's really expensive. He said, no, money's no object here. Yeah. I want it. And that's where the Teflon from fry pans came from. It was actually from the Manhattan Project.
So we need to be able to sell it to the military sector first. I think
that's might be one way of doing it.
Yeah, all right, as science people, military first and then the rest of us, right? From the University of Newcastle Sciences, John O'Connor, Professor there. Thank you so much for your time as always, John.
Thank you, Mark.
And we'll talk to you in a fortnight at 2NURFM.
2NURFM, a broadcast service of the University of Newcastle.